In this video, I talked to Justin Mayers, who's the founder of Kettle and Fire, the fastest growing bone broth company in the country. Justin built this business that's now over 8 figures in less than 2 weeks. Let's dive in.
Maybe go a little bit deeper on this about how you guys really got this started. Because I'm reading, some of the notes from your post, and I think this is the part that what most people do, at least in my observations, what 95% of people do is they say, "Hey, I want to sell this whiz bang thing, like a digital thing, or it's a piece of product. I'm going to spend months building it. Then I'm going to, maybe try to get an investor, find a developer, and then maybe someone will eventually buy it." And I just thought you had a really nice structure to figuring out that this is working and creating an 8-figure business, but doing it in a very quick and dirty way.
Thanks. Yeah. So first thing I did is this was sort of me solving my own pain point. And so bone broth was something I wanted. I thought other people wanted it too. That was like the genesis of the idea. And then I went online, looked at how many people are searching for bone broth on a monthly basis. Is there some press around it? Are there influencers who are talking about it? Turns out the answer to all of that was yes. And so then I took it the next step and was like, okay, the thing I want to know, especially for me at the time, I really wanted to know that people would pay for bone broth if I went through all the time to figure out how to make it, because it's really hard to dive into a new industry and be like, how do I make this shit? And so I really wanted to spend a lot of time validating it, because I knew it was going to be really annoying for me to try and figure out how to make bone broth at a commercial scale, given that was not my industry at all. And so I spent a bunch of time on setting up a landing page, buying ads. I think in my newsletter, I have a literal photo of the terrible landing page that I made, but was just driving cold traffic to this landing page and saying, if you want this product, check out, it's $29.99. And then I just from our ads to conversion costs, we were really profitable on that smoke test to the if we ran the numbers, and I think it would have been $100,000 business that was very profitable if just the smoke test numbers worked and we could keep it up for a year. And so we just ran those numbers and we're like, man, this is something people want. All the people that ordered it online, I would email them and just talk to them and be like, hey, is this something that you want? What are the problems you're trying to solve? All of them had very similar issues. Were struggling with gut health, wanted to improve their skin, joint health, one of those reasons. A lot of them were paleo. A lot of them were in communities and groups that I was kind of aware of, like Whole30. And basically just through talking to these people, many of them were like, this is a product I really want. It's a pain in the ass to make. I'm willing to pay to have someone else source it and make a really high quality version for me. Thank you for creating this company, which totally didn't exist at the time. And so after we saw enough customers that were telling us how badly they wanted it, willing to pay $30 a box, that's what we priced the first smoke test for, was literally $30 for a 16-ounce box of bone broth. I was like, okay, this is solving a real pain point, and people are going to be willing to pay for this at scale if we figure this shit out. And so just decided then to start the 10-month process of figuring out how to actually make bone broth after that.
Interesting. I think that's one of the things that I've really liked about starting businesses, with our monthly 1K.com course. It's that once you know that you have people who will pay, figuring it out is kind of the fun part. It's kind of the easy part, versus I think people do the reverse of that.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, I mean, figuring out how to make bone broth is not intrinsically fascinating to me. It especially wasn't in 2015. And so it was way more fun to figure out, is this something people will want? And then once you know it is, you can be like, okay, I'm going to solve the problem, and I'm going to be able to talk to my customers and be like, what are the price points you would consider? A lot of our customers even, or people that bought it and then were waiting for us to make a product. I don't know what you call that. It's probably not a customer. But that set of people, we sent them samples even of some of our first products. And we're like, hey, how does this land for you? Does it too salty, not salty enough? Just got their feedback on these sorts of things, so that when we actually launched, we had gotten a couple revisions of feedback, which meant that we had a much better product at launch.
Interesting. And so the 10 months, and then was it ads? And that was kind of the initial 0 to 100 in terms of customers?
Yeah, ads and then some affiliate. while we were looking for figuring out how to make the product, I started like networking and talking to a bunch of people that were in the paleo wellness spaces. Went to Paleo FX, just like met a couple people there, and a couple of them were like, "Hey, yeah, it's literally our job to put cool new products in front of people that are into paleo. So of course we'll help you." And so we built a lot of those relationships. And in 2015, when we launched, we were also the first like grass-fed bone broth on the market. And so you had this thing where a bunch of influencers were like, "I use bone broth for health, gut health, joint health, whatever." And then they didn't have a product that they could recommend. And like they make their entire living on recommending products and getting paid to do so. And so our product like filled a really nice gap that I kind of became aware of after we decided we were going to make the product.
I like this no competition thing that you do.
Yeah, try to.
Well, no, I mean, we made this mistake a lot of times where, like we built some of the stuff, we got into the Shopify app world and it was just so competitive. And it's like, how do we win here? And it's like, we don't win in playing with everyone else. So, we launched Haul Drop recently, which is how do we just drive Shopify store customers? Because that's what they really want. They don't need another email collect tool. There's enough of those out there.
Totally. Yeah. How have you thought about being like the only people in a market? Because that's something I've thought a lot about. And I think it's so important, especially not important. You can do it without it, but I think it really helps, especially in the early days of a business. Like if you're the first product to solve a need, you can just get a ton of momentum. I felt like that was you guys actually early in the day at Sumo.
I think I guess I've actually looked at it differently. I think there's kind of, there's people like Uber who literally invented a category. Like before there was no way to really hit a button. And so now they're worth whatever, $10 billion or $20 billion. And I think those have big risks, big rewards, but big failures. I guess one thing I wonder for e-commerce or how you're thinking about it is so many different businesses, and I guess there's no right or wrong, but they're like, oh, we did bone broth and we've hit our peak. Like, let's do new categories versus just like expanding what's working. And I know it's something that you've talked about, and I fully believe it's like, hey, you're doing this interview and this guy was like, hey, sales is really working well. Like, what other marketing channel should I do? And I don't know if you remember what you said. You're like, do more sales. He's like, yeah, I know, but like, what else? And you're like, sales. And I thought that was a really powerful lesson and reminder, which is just find the thing that's working and go a lot harder on it. And so I wonder if you're thinking, hey, the soup category is a multi-billion and we're only at 50 million or 100 million. Like there's a lot more room for it. How are you approaching that? Because that also affects your marketing.
100%. Yeah, I think for us, the way we look at it internally is we have a certain growth rate that we want to hit. And we look at, okay, how big is this category? For us, fortunately, we're in consumer. And so we can see like to the dollar, like how many people, what is the size of the bone broth market in retail on an annual basis? And so we can basically say like, okay, we're X% of the bone broth market. If we want to grow at this rate, like we're not going to be able to grow at this rate given current category size for more than like 4 years or something. So let's start looking into alternative lines of business. Let's see like what other categories we could take the brand into. Because to some extent, when you're a brand that when you have a brand that's like resonating with consumers, to some extent, it's easier to be like, we're now doing soup and like taking all the bad shit out that Campbell's puts into it, rather than like spending a bunch of money, time, and energy trying to like grow the bone broth category and make it grow from, instead of 5% a year, make it grow 12% a year or something like that. Because growing a category is just like expensive, time consuming, all of that. It can be amazing. Like Red Bull basically invented and created the energy drink category, and you benefit hugely from doing that. Chobani's kind of done the similar, but it just takes like a really long time. And so for us, we basically saw when we decided to enter the soup category, we basically saw like the incumbents are doing a bad job. They're putting stuff that we think makes people unhealthy in all of their products. So can we do a better job relative to what the competition is doing? If the answer is yes, it's something we'll consider. But like we still invest a ton of time and energy in our core, which is like our bone broth line, I would say. I think that wasn't a great answer, but like really for us, I think we just weigh trade-offs and talk a lot about like where do we invest.
Well, if I'm understanding you, you're saying like, hey, we did broth. It's really close to this vertical or close to this category called soup. that's even bigger, and we can get a slice of that, and we're not having to deviate too much from what we're already great at.
Yeah, exactly. I would say like if it's an adjacent move, it probably makes sense to invest, or it could make more sense to invest in those in those sort of like adjacent moves. Whereas when you're doing a marketing thing, it's like, if you have a channel that's working really well, just keep doing that, and it would make a lot of sense to me if someone who's like sales is crushing it, what should I do? If you're like, okay, maybe look at doing some partnerships, which is sort of like sales, but not entirely, as opposed to like doing a 180 and trying to do like SEO or some other weird channel to try and get that to work. I kind of think about it as like, great, we've kind of like proven that bone broth can work. We're now in the category, we're in the game. Where can we go from here to expand and like take more market share? But that's the phase of the business we're at. It would have been a really bad decision for us to expand the category like 2.5 years ago or 3 years ago when we were still super young.
When I saw you guys come out, I was like, oh, wow, good for Justin. Like, I was proud of you, and I was jealous. I was like, I taught him everything he knows, even though we didn't really work that closely together. And I think that there is a measurement of success where like, hey, have you worked with people that have gone on to do even bigger things than you? But I've noticed that like, dude, there's a fuck ton of these broths now. Whole Foods has a broth. There's this other broth of a broth. And I guess you guys are definitely a category leader, or at least in my mind. How have you guys thought about that? And how have you guys experienced that? Because part of me is like, yo, dog, I fucking invented this. Like, get off me.
Yeah, man. It's not fun. I mean, we fought a different battle when we were starting the business, where we were like, how do we get people to understand what bone broth is, and how do we get them to try our shit? And now we've like done a really good job of telling people why they should drink bone broth. And there's a bunch more companies cropping up to try and make it and serve that demand. And so I'd say that we've shifted from you should have bone broth, like that sort of messaging, more into like, here's how we're different than the competition, which is quality of the ingredients, long cook times. We've formulated our stuff. We've gotten like 4.5 years of reps in just trying to figure out how do we make a really good bone broth. We've like, when we launched, our price on shelf was $11.99 a box. Now it's $6.99. Like we've like become a much better company. And as we've scaled, we've like kept some margin for ourselves, but we're like giving margin back to the customer. We're making a way better product now than we were 4 years ago. Like to some extent, it's just it's going to take like a lot of time and investment for someone to catch up with us. And so you just kind of hope that you can run faster than the rest of the competition out there. Which is just like, that's the game of business. Like no one is going to like sit still and let you kind of just like,
I wish.
Yeah, exactly.
If you love this video and you want to watch me break down how Mr. Beast makes $97,529,400 a year from YouTube, then check out this video right up here. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Ding! I'll see you out there, and I love you. Pew, 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 pew.